for the past I think over 2 weeks at this point, Sinners has taken over the globe. It's been a very explosive movie for us, primarily black folks. Other folks have seen it, other folks have chimed in on it. Of course, that has led to discourse online, primarily TikTok, when it comes to people's interpretation of the movie. What do you interpret from the very beginning? Do you think it was a very linear story? Some people may feel like it was kind of sloppy and they couldn't follow the plot, stuff like that. This is going to be my rant for however long. I'm going to try not to be too long, but again, I'm still kind of exploring the way I want to make videos, the length of them, the sheer amount of them, stuff like that. So this video, I'm going to go pretty unscripted. I'm going to just go off my memory off of watching the movie, as I've seen it twice. The first time I saw it here in the Hampton Roads area. I went to an IMAX theater and saw it in the way that was supposed to be seen, not 70 millimeter, but just IMAX in general, which I think still did it pretty justice. Yeah, don't mind that lightning. But also I went to Dallas. I visited Dallas recently to see some family, and I went to Cinepolis, if that's how you pronounce it. And I went there. It wasn't as good as the IMAX experience if you pay attention to the aspect ratios, but it was, the movie itself obviously still great. Loved it. I thought people were tripping when they say they've seen it 3-4 times in theaters. I might push for a third one. I might. I don't know yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick this video off with my attempt at summarizing the movie. At this point, I think everyone's seen it, talked about it. You've been spoiled however many times over. If you haven't seen it at this point, you're just living under a rock, haven't made time, you're too busy for your own good. So I'm gonna try not to linger on it too long, and then I'll get into my interpretation of the movie, the things that stuck out to me, the things that kind of make it, more convoluted or adds layering to the theme or the motif of the movie, and just rant on and on from there until I just run out of breath or I decide to tame myself. So, story starts with the main character. His name is Sammy, young man. I know in real life, Miles Canton, the brother that plays him, is 20 years old. I'm assuming that Sammy is supposed to be around that same age, so we can probably think it's about 20 or so. And he's a sharecropper in the Mississippi Delta in 1932, if I remember correctly. This movie is supposed to take place in the early 1930s in the Mississippi Delta. And it's the type of movie that takes place over the course of basically 24 hours. So everything that happens is a well over 2-hour movie that everything happens in one day. And Sammy, being a sharecropper, he's up super early before everyone else, before his mom, before his siblings, before the sun even comes up. And he finishes up his quota of picking cotton for the day, goes back to his shack or his house for his siblings to wake them so that they can reach their quota and do their work. By the time he leaves, many of the older sharecroppers and old ladies and people are starting to come into the field for them to do their work while he's headed to church. Now, he regularly performs in his father's church. And at the time, of course, we're not talking mega churches. So we're talking pretty small, white, kind of shack looking church, what some may consider more traditional. He is looking for his guitar because Sammy is a blues player. He loves the blues, but for historical context, and hopefully this video doesn't get dinged for me using certain terms, but for those who don't know, as much as people, primarily black folks, respect blues now, and hip-hop is the main genre, hip-hop/rap is the main genre and culture that is kind of demonized when it comes to the entertainment realm, blues at one point was considered the devil's music, the same way at one point rock and roll was also considered the devil's music. I believe at one point even jazz was considered the devil's music. Whenever there's a new wave, it's always considered the devil's music. And the thing is, when you make this racial, and from the perspective of an Afro-American person, that coming from non-black people, one particular group, obviously that makes sense. But for black folks, they also were doing it. Whenever jazz arose, when jazz first arose, bluegrass, funk, rock, stuff like that, black people also were labeling these different genres of music as the devil's music. Now, it wasn't as binary as it was with non-black groups. For some, you had some that believed in it because these were our stories, these were our tales, our daily lives, love stories when it came to a woman you want to pursue or your wife even running into hard times, stuff like that. So it wasn't as binary, but you definitely could find black folks that would find certain genres when they arose to prominence and then even kind of faded away a bit, but they're still here. that would label these genres of art the devil's music. So when he goes to get his guitar, he runs into his father, who of course is the head preacher or pastor of the church. He has his guitar right there. He makes Sammy read a scripture from the Bible, which I know is Corinthians chapter 10, but I don't remember the verse. But it basically goes along the lines of, to the strength of basically avoiding temptation. But in the event that you fall for temptation, God creates a way out. And Sammy closes the Bible. He doesn't really want to entertain it that much. So he grabs his guitar and ultimately leaves. But before he does, this is what I consider one of the pressure points of the movie. And to me, when I say pressure points, I mean, like, from my opinion, the plot of the movie is pretty linear. It's pretty straightforward. Like the layering of the movie, and it's more convoluted than this. But when I watched it for the second time, there were two, maybe three parts that really caught my eye, that really makes the story not collapse or like fall on itself, but really makes it more convoluted and makes people want to be more opinionated, hence the online discourse. And this is one of them. Because, or rather, after he read that scripture, he grabs his guitar, he's about to leave. His father tells him, if you keep dancing with the devil, he's going to show up at your door one day. And Sammy makes a comment that says, I've been working all week. I just want to be free of this for a day. I'm going to touch on that later. Put that as a feather in your hat. Hold on to that. But that one, I'm probably going to harp on that one a good bit when we get to it. So the movie picks up. Enter Michael B. Jordan's characters, where he plays two twins. He plays a set of twins, Smoke and Stack. Come to find out that those individual names actually are references to people in real life, but I'm not a history buff, so I'm not going to focus on the historical aspect as much. So the Smoke Stack twins come back into town. They left Chicago. They were drafted into the army at one point. They've seen war. They were part of rival gangs up in Chicago, supposedly led to the Valentine's Day massacre, maybe. And they've been gone for 7 years. They come back and they're ready to open up a juke joint. They pick up Sammy, and who's their younger cousin, by the way, and from there they split. Smoke takes the truck with all the drinks and stuff in it, takes it into town. He reconnects with the old homeboy and his wife so that they can get some signs made by the end of that day and get everything up and running for business. While Stack, who's more of the free, kind of, I guess you say, immature brother, and he's the younger twin, he and Sammy, they go and they basically look to promote as well as to recruit. And this is where they find Delta Slim. Delta Slim is a local pianist who obviously knows Stack and his brother. Pretty popular in the area because there's another venue that I can't remember the name of that he has been going to every day or every night. I believe he says for the past 20 years. And he initially tries to remain loyal to that other venue until Stack convinces him otherwise with Irish beer, which is a reference to the gang that he was in up in Chicago, the Irish mob. Whereas I believe Smoke was a member of the Italian mob. They end up convincing them to play the piano for them at their juke that night. As I'm talking like the same day they get back into town, they get the place for the juke and they want to get up and running, grand opening. And they kind of throw on a little bit of a promo show between Delta Slim and Sammy playing his guitar. And Sammy shows Stack that he can sing as well, in addition to playing the guitar. He wasn't expecting that. So now they're like, yeah, we're gonna make some money. We're gonna do very well tonight. So all this passes. They drive down the road. They see some other brothers in the chain gang doing some work. The juke finally opens. It's nighttime. Well, actually, no, let me rewind. Another key part of the movie prior to that, introducing Remick, who's basically the villain of the movie and the vampire, because I probably should have mentioned this, but Sinners is supposed to be a vampire film, and it's a completely original IP. It does not have any connection to anything else. Ryan Coogler he did the studying, he wrote it, directed it, everything. This is brand new. So Remick is a vampire, an Irish vampire at that, which is going to come back, but at least in discussion when I start ranting about the movie. He basically finds a place to hide because the local Choctaw natives are hunting him down, and he looks for or finds himself at the door of the home of two Klansmen, a husband and wife who are Klansmen, and because he's white, he's able to pay for entrance into their home. The Choctaw warned that couple You might not want to believe that guy. He's not what he seems, but hey, God blessings to you, and they leave. And they find out the hard way. Those clans people, they find out the hard way that he is not human. He's a vampire, and he ends up turning them both. From there, I would say the next major thing that happens is the opening of the Juke. Now, there are two characters that I skipped over when I talked about Stack and Sammy went to a train station to do some promotion for the Juke and to recruit Delta Slim to perform that night. One is Mary. Mary is a lover who kind of had a sibling-ish relationship with the twins, but not really, because again, she and Stack, they had a thing. They messed around at some point in the past. She's what would be considered white passing. Keep in mind, this is taking place in the 1930s. She would have passed she would have been known as a black woman back then because her great grandfather was half black. In the 1930s, she would have been considered full black and would have gotten all the treatment that came with it. Versus Hailee Steinfeld now, that is her actual lineage. Her great grandfather is actually half black. So you can make the argument she's still a black woman, she's still not, whatever. But in the context of the movie, she would be considered a black woman, but she is so white passing. Like if you look at her, you couldn't tell. Then you have the second character, Perline. Perline becomes, I guess you can say, a fling/love interest of Sammy. They end up meeting at the train station and flirting, but the thing is, they are not total strangers. They've seen each other around, and Sammy recalls that Perline can sing very well. She remembers the same thing about him, as well as his ability to play the guitar well. So they don't know each other like that, but they're not total strangers, and chances are, flirtatiously and otherwise, they've had their eyes on each other for quite some time. This all carries over to the Juke, where, by the way, after the train station situation, Smoke, he also made another stop. When it came to the signing stuff, he also made another stop at his love interest's place, and her name being Anne. Anne is a hoodoo priestess, essentially, and she is key to this movie, as we'll see when we come to the Juke joint, what happens there, and the vampire just situation. Come to find out that Anne and Smoke, they were lovers in the past before he left the Mississippi Delta, the Clarksville, Mississippi specifically. They had a child that did not make it. At some point he left and they never really forgot their connection. They reconnect, and this ultimately culminates in them reuniting, if you will. And from there, the next major thing that happens is the opening of the Juke. Now, a bunch of stuff happens. Great performance that, oh my goodness, two main performances that happens. The performance by Perline, that was amazing, portrayed by Jamie Lawson, who is amazing. And there's a certain part in that train station scene that I think Ryan Coogler set it up like that on purpose. If you know what I'm talking about, and then the performance before hers was with Sammy. And Sammy, he put on a performance that puts his whole power on display. And here's what I mean by power. In the very beginning of the movie, there's like a narration. Think, your favorite like Pixar or Disney movies where they open up with a narration and there's like a story on the cave wall and they're like, there's this prophecy or there's this group of people that have these abilities and stuff like that. But whenever these people arise or whenever their abilities are used, it draws trouble or people want to seek them out. That is pretty much the core of this movie, and it all revolves around Sammy. Sammy has a gift for playing music so well that he can conjure up the spirits of our ancestors, more so black folks' ancestors, presumably, not only of the past, but even those yet to come. And in this performance, what we see when he performs a song, I Lied to You, which is basically a confession to his father indirectly that I lied to you when I say I don't like the blues, or, I lie to myself when I say, or I lie to myself when I try to reduce it. I love the blues. And keep in mind, again, at one point, the blues was considered the devil's music. Sammy's father is a devout Christian and the leader of his own church. So you can see why that doesn't mix. And he puts on such a great performance that ultimately summons the spirits of ancestors, both past and future, which leads to one of the best scenes I think I've seen in the movie in a very long time, really ever. You gotta see it. I'm not gonna give it up, but you have to see it if you haven't seen it already. It's beautiful. Once that scene ends, once that musical scene ends, because this movie gives you a bit of everything, and it gives you a little bit of a musical edge. And at the end of Sammy's performance, you see Remick and the two clans people that he turned into vampires waiting outside of the juke, and they try to gain entrance. When that ultimately doesn't pan out, but they get the attention of course, the twins and some of the key people, their ladies and love interests, also in the juke, that's when they have two different opposing conversations. And this is the second pressure point for me when it comes to not only what makes the plot a bit more layered, but also illustrates the difference in how the twins each handle their respective romantic/sexual relationships. There's two different conversations. One, Smoke has with Sammy when it comes to Sammy's desire to pursue music and kind of get into the same game that the twins are in, but he says this one-on-one with Smoke, while Stack is having a separate conversation with Mary, making it known that so far, as far as that night, they're not doing so hot financially, which usually means they're not going to last much longer as a business. Maybe a couple more months, and that's really it. And ultimately, they do want to make money from this. So, key thing right there leads Mary to going outside and Stack using her essentially in her white passing appearance to mingle with Remick and the other two people outside, which leads to her being turned into a vampire, which then leads to her coming back inside and trying to do with Stack, reigniting their old flames and situations. But that leads to Stack getting turned into a vampire. They both enter or exit, the juke. And from there, everyone that left the juke, because Smoke, when he catches Mary in the act of turning Stack into a vampire, but Stack's body remains lifeless for quite some time, he responds by lighting her up. He quickly finds out that's not gonna do the job, and she ends up leaving. Then he ends the party, everyone else is forced to leave, only to find out that by doing that, everyone else that was in the juke that left has now been turned into vampires as well. Stack ends up reawakening, tries to play it off like he's not who he says he is, when everyone, more so Anne, who again is a voodoo priestess and she's kind of familiar with the concepts of different supernatural beings, she makes it known like, yeah, this is not your brother. We're not letting him out. He ends up breaking out and runs outside as well, and ends up mingling with now his vampire brethren and sisterin, if you will. This all leads to essentially a big battle where one of the characters who everyone is very mad at, Grace, she ends up inviting all the vampires in so that Remick can take Sammy, because he makes it known that is what he's looking for. He's looking for Sammy, but he silently is also looking for Anne. We just don't know. Annie? He's also looking for her and to convert her as well because of her knowledge of different supernatural beings and practices that can protect people from vampires primarily. And we don't realize that until the battle kicks off and she gets bitten by Stack, which means she's gonna turn, but Smoke, not having been bitten and turned into a vampire yet, he finishes the job so that she can't come back. And that's when we realize that that is a major blow to them. But the main thing that Remick is looking for is Sammy because of his ability to conjure up spirits. What we find out at the very tail end of this battle, if not prior to that, is Remick being Irish, and this is where his Irish lineage kind of adds another layer to the plot. Black American folks historically have leaned a lot on our weird history with white folks for a certain very obvious reason. Mainly the detail that whatever came before, when we were back in Africa and they sold us off and did whatever they did, part of that process of colonization is to wipe out any and all tradition that a group of peoples is familiar with, including religion, spiritual practices, and stuff like that. This is one of those situations where we find out that there actually was a whole other group where Europeans, specifically Western Europeans, did the same thing to them that they did to us. And that's Irish folks. Irish folks were also forced upon when it came to the expansion of Western European influence and the colonization of other groups of people, and their spiritual practices, their culture, their dances, their music was also stripped from them. Remick is framed to be the lone survivor of at least a time period of Irishmen that which essentially has left him lonely for eternity because he's not going to age, nor will he, you know what I mean? He's not going to bite the dust. So the closest thing that he can do to reunite with his people is to use Sammy by turning him into a vampire, one of his followers, so that he can return to and or commingle with his people for the rest of his life, and he won't be alone anymore. A very key part of the movie happens here, and you can argue this is the third pressure point, and the one I'm going to bring up is the fourth one. At the very end of the battle, when it seems like all is lost, almost everyone's been turned, if not everyone's been turned, the only ones left, presumably, are Sammy and Smoke, but Smoke is out of sight, out of mind because he's in a fight with Vampire Stack. Sammy jumped from the second story of the juke to get outside, and Remick ends up catching up with him anyway in a more evolving vampire-like state the longer this draws on. Sammy, in what many people may consider the right thing to do, when he hits his wit's end, he starts using the Lord's Prayer to defend himself. That doesn't work. In fact, in one of my second time watching it, I didn't notice it. But when he starts doing that, Remick notices, oh, I remember this. It's kind of one of those moments where it's like, oh, that's what we're doing. That you think that's going to help you? Let me show you something. And Remick starts repeating the Lord's Prayer word for word. And what makes it even worse is that it spreads from the rest of the vampires that he turned, because he's like I don't want to say alpha, because it's not like if they finish him off, the rest of them have to go. Like, they're independent of one another, but they do follow his orders. You know, he's still the head honcho. So not only is Remick now reciting the Lord's Prayer, all of his followers are too. And that completely stumps Sammy in his tracks. He truly does not know what to do in this moment to defend himself. And Remick says those words were passed down to me too by men that I hated, or men that I really didn't like, because they colonized me too. And yet in those words, I still found and find comfort. And I think there's a key point in that, but I'm gonna harp on that later. The movie then continues from there after Smoke ends up stabbing Remick in the heart with a wooden stake. And they use pretty classic vampire tropes throughout this movie. When you stab him with a wooden stake through the heart, that's usually what kills a vampire. So they kind of continue with the vampire traditional tropes. If you watch like cartoons and stuff growing up, they do that. They continue with those things. From there, the sun rises and all the vampires basically are done at that point. And from there, the next major part of the story happens. This actually was shown at the very beginning. We just didn't get any context. So at the very beginning, at the very end, we see Sammy returning from the juke, pulling up in front of his father's church when service has already commenced, and he pushes the doors open, looking raggedy. He has claw marks scarring up his face, blood, dirty clothes, all that stuff. The thing is, now that's at the end of the movie, compared to the beginning of the movie, we have context, and we actually saw what transpired that led to Sammy looking like that. Oh, by the way, his guitar was broken, and the only thing he has left is the handle, essentially. The top half of the handle of where like the frets and everything are in the strings, that's all he has. So we see him in a completely broken, shattered state physically, maybe even mentally, and we have now seen at the end of the movie why that is. This is, in my mind, the third, maybe fourth pressure point. Now we see his father's response, because in the beginning we didn't see the response of his father. In the end, we see his father's response. And his father's response, he doesn't hug him. He doesn't say, what happened? What's going on? Why are you bloodied up? Where you get these claw marks on your face from? Nothing. He is moving forward. Remember, in the beginning, his father gave him a warning saying, if you keep dancing with the devil, mainly by indulging in your music and your art, that the devil will come and find you. And he just assumes that that's exactly what happened. It sucks because he's not completely wrong, but the reasoning is what I'm going to harp on later. He immediately just jumps right in and say, drop the guitar, which there is symbolism in that guitar. Now, what you see it as is up to you. But in this context, the guitar, it represents what some may consider Sammy's covenant with the devil or with evil spirits that led to him being in danger. The time where he said, I want to be away from this for a day. And that's where initially the movie cuts. We don't see what happens after that. There's a mid-credit scene and an end-credit scene. The mid-credit scene, it takes place 60 years later, Chicago, 1992, where Sammy has his own venue named Perlene's, which is something I'm gonna talk about. It shows him performing, and he became a big blues singer. He did well. He made a whole career out of it. He did everything that he set out to do, or at least that he told Smoke that he wanted to do. We find out that not all of the vampires were burned to a crisp in the sun. Stack and Mary, they're still there. They're in Chicago now. They just can only go out when it's nighttime, and whatever doors they cross, they need permission. That's it. They're still vampires, and they still will live for eternity. But now they're in what's considered traditional 90s clothes, chain. Stack kind of has like a high top type of cut. You know what I'm saying? Mary looked good with the leather jacket and like retro looking jeans, mom wash type of jeans. You know what I'm saying? Stack got like a Coogee type sweater on, think B.I.G., Biggie Smalls. They have all that, and they just stopped by to check on Sammy, get him to play the more traditional blues because everything's more electrified now. So he plays like traditional blues for him, and they love it. They just check on him, and Stack makes it known that the only reason that he allowed Sammy to live all those years as a human is because in the fight with Smoke was going to, finish the job and kill him. But instead of doing that, he was like, I'll make you a deal. If you leave Sammy alone and leave him to live a full life, I will leave you alive. And that's exactly what they did. What we find out after the vampire situation, there's actually a little something after that I left out. So the guy that Smoke and Stack bought the venue of the juke joint from was an older white man. And they assumed that he was a Klansman. He tried to play dumb like the Klan doesn't exist anymore. Come to find out, what Remick actually ends up telling them when, they're trying to persuade them to become vampires, and they actually accuse Remick of being a Klansman. He was like, oh no, I'm not that. I actually find that disrespectful. Matter of fact, when I finish turning all of y'all and making y'all one of us, we're actually going to go into town and we're going to find that bigot and we're going to, rectify that situation as well. Because he's the grand dragon of the local, Klans people in the area. Come to find out, the guy, that married couple of Klans people that Remick turned, the husband is the nephew of that man. So he now knows, Remick knows everything about the Klansmen, because anyone that he turns, he gets their memories, and same thing for them. They can access his memories. That's how he was able to confirm that. So now when the vampires are all said and done, Smoke stays behind while Sammy leaves. Because Remick made it known, oh yeah, those Klans people, they were going to come and get y'all anyway. Like, you bought the land and everything, you threw them cash, don't matter. They were going to come and backstab you anyway. So he gets into his army bag. He starts sniping them, throws a grenade in one of the cars, all that stuff. He takes them out. And at the end of it all, he ends up rejoining Anne and their unborn child at the end of it. It was a very beautiful scene. Very much recommend y'all see that. And that's something else I'm going to talk about as well. Going back to the mid-credit scene, we see that older Sammy plays more traditional or classic blues for Stack and Mary, and they leave from there. The end credit scene is younger Sammy in the church playing his music and just singing, I believe, I don't think it was just Little Light of Mine. It might have been, or some interpolation of it. But, he plays his guitar, sings a song in the church, and that's all it is. And then it cuts from there, and that's the end of the movie. Very great movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. The more I talk about it, the more I think I might give it a third watch just to really see if I missed anything. Now, let me go ahead and start ranting. So, obviously, this movie stirred up a lot online. Everyone is still talking about it, and we're like 2.5 weeks out of release. It's still, I think, a top 10 movie globally at this point. I could talk more about my view of the movie as a whole, but I'm gonna focus on the 3 to 4 pressure points that I've identified. Now, after talking about it, I identified another one, kinda. So, the first thing that adds a certain layer of convolution to the movie is the very beginning. When Sammy is made to read Corinthians 10 and reading that scripture about temptations, and if you fall for temptation, then God will provide a way out. Most people have shared the belief, especially from a religious standpoint, that the temptation was Sammy's music, in addition to the lines where his father said, if you keep dancing with the devil, he's going to find you. Many people will also mix that with Sammy's line saying, I just want to be away from this for a day. Now, when you watch the movie, Sammy, the way his body language comes across is he like looks around, and when he says, I want to be away from this for a day, he looks around and he's in the church. He's looking around the church. Most people took that as he wants to be away from God's watch and protection for 24 days. He wants to be away from the church for 24 days. He wants to be away from his father, who's, you may argue, is a representation of God in the movie, for I said 24 days, for 24 hours, for a day, right? And I don't see it as that. I think it was just a regular, because prior to him making that comment, he says, I've been working hard all week. I want to be away from this for a day. I just took that as like a regular human being thing. I've been working between the fields and the church, but the church is still a place of work for him, mainly in that it's a place that he doesn't necessarily love or want to be there, or he's doing music that just does not light his soul on fire the way that blues does. So it's still more work for him than anything. He wants to be away from responsibilities and everything for 24 hours, one day, where it just revolves around his passion, his love for music, his love for blues, the way he wants to show it to the world and illustrate it and present it. That's what he wants to do. I don't agree with people saying that he wanted to separate from God for a day. I don't think that's what that was. I think it was far more humane than that. And just that if you've been busting your behind for a prolonged period of time, for weeks or months, you're going to say, I've been putting effort, time, and work into this. And no matter if it's for the good of people, good for myself, good for my health, whatever it is, it's work. It's not necessarily something I love to do time, day in, day out. I need a break. And I think that's all that was. I don't think that was a whole thing of like, I want to be separated from God. When it comes to that temptation part though, the first time I watched the movie, the temptation I think was meant to be represented through Remek's offer of becoming a vampire and living for eternity, which also meant sacrificing his power, his gift of connecting with his ancestors, past and future, through music. That he essentially would have had to give that up, because even though he would have retained it, it would have had to be at the behest of Remek. He wouldn't have been able to do it the way he wanted to do it, even though he would have had the literal power. The purpose would have been different behind it. And I found that the first time I watched the movie, I was actually tempted, I was torn between factions. If I was there, I would have been like, well, shoot, would I have stayed human, or would I have actually taken Remek on his offer? Because he's not making it that bad, and he's not making it like a racial thing. Like, he makes it known, like, no, we don't mess with them racial folks. I took advantage of them, but I don't mess with them. We're gonna handle that situation at some other point in time. And I actually found myself being tempted, if I was there, I would probably think about this, if I'm being real. I think that is what that scripture was looking to. Now, what you may wonder, what would have been God's way out in that situation? Would that have been essentially, his passing, throwing yourself into the sun and being done with it so that your soul can be released, or something else? I think that's up for interpretation. But to me, that struck me as a better fit for the temptation scripture in Corinthians that Sammy was made to recite at the beginning of the movie. The second pressure point that I found was the conversations that happened in parallel when Stack had sent Mary outside to talk to the vampires, unbeknownst to her at the time, and Smoke was having a conversation with Sammy, where Sammy said, basically, I want to be like y'all. And I'm gonna focus more on the Smoke and Sammy conversation. Smoke told Sammy that he's never known a happy musician. Anyone that has made music their life, he doesn't know a single happy musician. He also referred to the juke joint as improper business, improper stuff. And I was, why is that? Why is he referred, the juke joint, especially again, those two musical performances, one from Pearline and one from Sammy? I was like, that was the best part of the movie. Those were both the best parts of the movie. First and second time, especially for Pearline's performance, the second time, I wanted to jump out my seat. So when Smoke said that he labeled all of that as improper business, I was very confused, because some of the most beautiful parts of the movie came from that. But I had to clock in after the second watch and remember Sammy's performance, which came before Pearline's, it was creative because someone was kind of getting jumped, basically, and they included some of the hits from him getting beat up into Sammy's performance. No, I lied. That was Pearline's performance. That was Pearline's performance when they did that. I think that's what he meant. Like, I don't think they saw the juke joint inherently as evil, because even Stack mentioned earlier in the movie, this is a place for us by us, the original FUBU, you know what I mean? And I don't think they saw the juke joint and everything like that, or the gathering of black folks, whatever, as inherently bad. But to run a juke joint and to participate in certain types of business, you are going to get drawn into certain things. And the guy that was getting jumped, they were gambling, you know what I'm saying? And he was using loaded dice, and they don't like that, so they packed him out. I think that's what he meant by the improper business part. Because again, some people were saying, leave this to us. Either play church music, which again, many people saw as like, you need to go back to God. You separated from God. You need to go back. But also he was like, if you're going to play music, go to, I think it was somewhere in Arkansas, where he's like, there are proper black folks, go mess with them, but don't do this. And I think it wasn't like give up music, because you could frame it as he was kind of regurgitating a certain mentality or viewpoint that Sammy's father has. And I don't think it was meant to be like that. I think he wants Sammy to be happy. I think he did care for Sammy, because in a good part of the movie, you would think that Smoke does not like Sammy, when I think he is. And I think he very much leads with a protector mindset. And if you find out a key thing about Smoke, Stack, and their father, you'll understand why Smoke is as serious as he is, whereas Stack is more aloof. And I think he just kind of secondhand gave that to Sammy, which is why he was rough with him, but also protective. Like, I love you, boy. Like, leave this stuff that can get crazy, not inherently crazy, not inherently bad, but it can go where it can go. And you need to leave that to us. If you want to indulge in your music and your craft, at least go to a certain place where black folks operate a certain type of way, because any other place, it's just not going to be the same. I think that's what that was. But at first, it left me very confused. So I was like, I wonder why he said like the juke joint is improper business. Like, I was kind of confused about that. The third thing, and I'll attach the fourth thing that I noticed about the words prayer. The third thing that adds, a nice layer to the movie is the ending, where Sammy returns to the church and we see more about what happens once he gets back. And we find that, again, he has the broken guitar in his hand. He walks into the church. He's not saying anything. He's in shock. He's terrified, probably confused. He's probably everything up and down the spectrum. His father's trying to get him to give your heart, your voice, and your soul to God, and to leave the guitar, what again can be seen as a personification of the devil or demons in general, behind. This one I didn't notice until my second time seeing it, and I haven't seen anyone bring this up. Whenever his father mentioned those three things, your heart, your voice, and your soul, it kind of flashes over to a different character. So when he says, give your heart to God, when Sammy's father says, give your heart to God, it flashes over to Pearline. And I think despite their limited time together, and keep in mind, Pearline was married, so she cheated, and that's not good. Some say that there is a representation of the 7 deadly sins in the movie, and that Pearline represents lust, maybe / temptation, because they ended up, what we know that Sammy went down, we know that, but it's kind of presumed or implied that they went all the way, right? I think, was there lust involved? Was there definitely infidelity and, wrong in that, mainly on Pearline's side? But biblically, Sammy also participated in adultery by messing with a married woman. So that's bad as well. So I think you can have those things at the same time. There was a sense of lust, temptation in there. They both did wrong. Who it falls more on, your opinion. But I think Sammy genuinely loved Pearline. And keep in mind, after 60 years passes, he names his Chicago venue after her. I think he actually loved her. Because keep in mind, when they were at the train station doing like promotion and stuff, that may have been the first time they were formally introduced, but that was not the first time they saw each other. They were not complete strangers to each other. That was just the first time someone finally spoke up and they drew a direct connection. But it's one of those things where essentially, when there's tension, you can either act on it or you can leave it be. But both of y'all know where it can go. I think that was their case with just a bit more background, like a bit more familiarity. But I think that was basically their case. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't supposed to go anywhere. I think they truly loved each other. And because of the setting of the movie, Pearline, it's kind of implied that she didn't want to be in that marriage, or at the very least she didn't care about it, which is a safe bet because we're in a time period where women had to get married unwillingly. At this point, they have all the choice in the world, but we're talking early 1930s. These women have to marry for survival. So for all we know, this is a marriage she don't care about. Like, I'm talking like her husband never brought up by name, never pops up, nothing, like he does not matter. No one's even bothered to ask who would have portrayed her husband in the movie. Nothing. No one cares. I think if she had her choice, she would have married Sammy, or at least saw where that road would have went in the long term. I think there was actually something there, and he genuinely loved Pearline. I think Sammy actually loved Pearline. The second one is a bit weird, and I can't quite place it. So we can just introduce this thought. When he says voice, when Sammy's father says voice, it flashes over to Delta Slim. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is Delta Slim is a representation of what Sammy was going to become, whether the alcoholism, because Delta Slim was a big alcoholic, the fact that he participated in music, and he serves as a prime example as Smoke's point of I've never met a happy musician. That could be why. But we also know that Delta Slim has lived a long life, and he kind of alludes to some of the stuff he's been in. He's the comedic relief, but he's been through some things. And again, if you see that not Desert Road, but like that chain gang scene that was not scripted, or at least part of it was not scripted, you know that there is stuff behind him drinking, his habit of drinking. From sipping to music to depression, potential sadness and stuff, you could view voice and frame it as Delta Slim. That's the future version of who Sammy either did become or could have become. And when you say voice, you could mean music. You could mean his inclination and his gift for music. But I'm not certain about that. One, if we're taking it very literal of voice and what Sammy uses his voice for, then, and you apply that musically, Delta Slim was never shown singing. He just plays piano. He's a pianist or an accompanist. He doesn't vocalize musically. So it makes it hard to maintain that connection that Delta Slim is who Sammy would be or could be through music. When he says voice, and now that I think about it, I want to say experience. Like Delta Slim, like when you remove Sammy from it and you only keep Delta Slim and you think about voice, you think of the experiences and the wisdom that he shares and has shared throughout the movie, mainly but when things get serious, Delta Slim gets serious as well. And I think when it flashed over to Delta Slim, when Sammy's father said to give your voice to God, I think he meant give up this experience that you are willing to obtain. Give up the life. I know it's supposed to be everything. Like these are components of life, but I think it was a way of saying give up this particular path, which is going to lead you to have a similar experience to this guy. And therefore you will spew the same type of stuff that Delta Slim would spew. You would live the same things, you would see the same things, you would do the same things. I think that's what he meant by his voice. Give up this path that you are on, this specific path that you're on. But I know that can still be weird because again, it pertains to music. It's a bit more broad. It's not all the way there, but that's what it makes me think of. Like he is trying to deter Sammy from becoming a carbon copy of Delta Slim. Now, this is the next point that's going to completely, or rather is going to clash with the second one a bit, which is why I'm rather introduce it as just conversation for anyone who makes it this far. When he says, give your soul to God, remember that very last scene where Sammy is in the church playing the guitar, singing? We don't even see that part yet. And it references that. It shows a clip of that. It flashes over to that of him singing, say, give your soul to God. And I think this one's also very on the nose, that give your passions up, give up this earthly desire to God. These are the three things I want you to give up. I think that one's pretty straightforward. Doesn't need to be dove into. I think that one's pretty straightforward. Give up your heart, which is this woman that you presumably love. Give her up, even though lust and stuff, that was part of it, but give up this woman you love. I think give up this path that you're looking for, this goal that you want to reach, give that up. That will lead you to become a carbon copy of Delta Slim or anyone else who does not live what your father would deem as a godly or righteous life. I think that's 2. 3, give up this earthly passion that is leading the devil to you. and leading demons to you, to be used by them, to be harmed by them, and is attracted them your way. I think those are the three things that add the type of conversations we're seeing now, like the layers that are being tackled in conversation that we see now on social media. I'm gonna try not to make this last much longer because this is already OD long. I'll try to go off of what I remember, but I know one thing that I want to tackle is the religious aspect of the movie. Many people saw this as an anti-Christian movie, particularly because I haven't heard from any other demographics. But many people saw this as an anti-Christian movie, and I don't care for that point of view. I don't know what Ryan Coogler's like faith is or anything like that, but I think it's fair to say he is very much a pro-black person. In fact, he pretty much came out to say, for the sake of this movie, the plot of this movie pretty much got that point across. You know, again, it's a for us by us movie, and he pretty much confirmed like the plot of the movie and the theme of the movie had nothing to do with being anti-Christian or anti-religious. He actually did a very good job of providing room for different spiritual / religious systems to breathe. Now, while I do agree that he did antagonize or kind of frame Christianity as the bad guy here, or at the very least as an entity of unreliability, and you know, because of the final fight with Remick and his vampires, he still allowed Christianity, Choctaw, and their spiritual beliefs that usually is more in connection to nature, and African spirituality, which can be traced down to hoodoo, which is what's being used. He allowed mainly those three to coexist, and none of them necessarily overpowered one another, you know, depending on how you look at it. So I don't agree with people saying that Sinners, by its name and the nature of it, it's a vampire movie and stuff like that, that it's an anti-Christian movie and all that stuff. If I can maintain myself, I'm gonna try to stick to two things I'm gonna harp on. One, I ain't gonna lie, I strongly dislike a lot of the like religious, spiritual backlash that it got, mainly when it came to certain interpretations of certain scenes. And one of them being that ending scene when Sammy held the guitar, the broken guitar, in his hand when he got back to his father's church in the middle of service, and his father was telling him to give it up. And there are some people who are like, yes, call to God, give it up, go back. This is what happened when you left the house of God, when you left God for 24 hours, and you know, you never should have left. Now you have good reason to go back. I really do not like that take. I don't like it. The main reason, in the context of the movie, I don't care for those takes is because of two main reasons. One, the movie makes it known at the very beginning that people who have the ability to use music to connect with ancestors past and the future, that power innately draws evil spirits and entities to it. That does not inherently mean that the gift is evil. If I had to make, I'm not even gonna make a specific anime nerd comparison. It is a common trope in fiction, even in nonfiction. The church even talks about it in the church services I've been to. Whenever you have something good in you, on you, it is bound to attract those who want to use it for their selfish needs. And that does not mean that your gift is inherently evil or is meant to be used for wrongdoing. It simply means you need to have a level of discernment of who you use that gift for, who and what and when you use that gift. That does not mean the gift in its entirety is evil and should not be used. And when people had that response that he needs to stop playing music altogether because it draws evil, it's almost like we didn't watch the same movie. It's one of those mindsets that's like, there's no way we watched the same movie. Because one, again, just because something drew that attention does not inherently mean he needs to stop playing music. It means, one, in my opinion, just like if you, matter of fact, I'm gonna use one specific example. I'm gonna try to keep going. My Hero Academia. Deku becomes like Rags Deku, like kind of evil Deku a little bit, or dark Deku. And he fights his classmates that try to pull him back in because he wants to leave them alone to keep them safe. Because now that he understands the danger that his very presence will bring, because he is what the ultimate villain of the series is looking for, it puts the line of it puts other people that he cares about in the line of danger, in the line of fire. And those people will say, okay, fine, we'll protect you. You have helped us. You've cared for us. You've covered us. You've protected us. Let us protect you. Just because danger is coming our way, because you are what these people are looking for and you have something they need or want, does not mean you do away with us. Let us cover you the way you cover us. That to me is a much more appropriate response. To say that you will scapegoat a gift that, in the context of the movie, comes naturally from us. And the movie actually makes it a point in the movie to say that Christianity and other religions, we didn't bring that. At least not the version that we have. Our ancestors didn't have it at that point in time. But you know what we did create that was meant for us, by us, and illustrates our experiences the best ever? Blues and music overall, our music. That is what is truly ours. And they drive home that point by drawing the parallel between black folks and Irish folks, saying, we're not the only ones this happened to, which is something I think most black folks didn't know, that happened to Irish folks as well. We are not the only ones that Christianity and basically any Western European influence has been pushed on. If you keep religion off the table, primarily Christianity, but if you keep religion off the table and any type of social injustice is done to black folks, we always want to talk about how they want to copy our style, they want to hurt us, they can't be us, they're not like us, all that stuff. And it always culminates in this whole thing of we are magic. The minute you bring religion on the table, it's gone. It's gone. And I think this movie could, to an angle, be seen as a critique of religion in general, just using Christianity because that's more relatable for Black American folks. It could be seen as that. And I think that's pretty accurate, because up until that point, again, the type of moment that says there's no way we watch the same movie. Because even when it came to the guitar being broken, it wasn't that the vampires broke it. Sammy took it and smacked Remick upside the head with it. And it was the one thing that contained anything that hurt Remick even a bit. And because Remick's followers can feel his pain, the guitar held the one thing, the silver round piece, that hurt Remick and therefore hurt all of them. The Lord's Prayer didn't help him. The Lord's Prayer didn't help him. He was able to recite it. He said, this happened to me too. The rest of his followers started reciting it. The one thing that most black folks will tell you, you need to start pray, use the Lord's Prayer and everything, didn't help him. But you know what did help him? That guitar. And if you were to use the guitar as a symbol of us, black folks, Black American folks, if you stick to the blues context, and Christianity as a Western and European influence and power that was forced on us, aka them, us versus them, you would choose them over us. That's what I don't like. That's what really sets me, just what gets me going when I see those type of thoughts on social media. When it came to people saying, I wanted him to call it to God and give it up. Like, you saw that what he was trying to do didn't work. You can actually make the argument that Remick and Sammy's father are two sides of the same coin. You really could, in which case neither of them are exactly like hero type people, you know? There are 2 points. There was one with that part that I wanted to address. The other thing I wanted to address was just the kind of like public, like some people saying, I don't want to see it because it's sinners and it's called Sinners and it's probably attracting demons and spirits and whatnot. And yet, when I see The Conjuring coming up, I believe there's another one, Last Rites, Conjuring, you know, anything in that universe. So Annabelle, The Nun, Paranormal Activity in that series. What's it called? Terrifier, It, you know, any other major like series of movies, Chucky, horror movies, Halloween, you know, the paranormal, but especially paranormal stuff. Oh, Hereditary, I haven't seen it, but because I'm not a horror movie guy. I'm not a horror movie guy, but Hereditary, I heard, is a different level of scary. Skeleton Key, stuff like that. All of a sudden, no one cares. No one cares if there are spirits coming through. No one cares what you're opening yourself up to. No one cares about spirits or shadow beings, whatever, coming through the screen. No one cares about the name of them. No one cares. No one cares about all these upside down crucifixes, which is basically a staple in horror movie community. No one cares. But when it comes to an original IP by a black man, that is barely scary. And the name Sinners, again, it might be more of a thematic thing, maybe not as literal. You want to take it as the 7 deadly sins, fine. I think you can make a case for that. I've seen some good takes on that, all that stuff. But y'all will watch all this other stuff. But let there be something like this that is barely anything of that, more of a social critique than anything, possibly pro-black as heck. And now all of a sudden there's so much discourse. Any other time, if a horror movie drops and a black person's talking about it, it's a review of how good, bad, whatever it is. Heretic is another one. Heretic is another reason, because I watched Heretic last week for the first time, because I don't do horror movies, but it's really not that scary. It's really not scary at all. But when it comes to a critique on religion, that's purely what Heretic is. like to the bone. Like that's purely what it is, and I like it. I don't think I'll watch it again, but I like it. But that's another movie that comes into mind. Just like in that movie, you realize there are a bunch of different versions of a lot of the same stuff. Have been misused for historical reasons, power reasons, come from different places, different times, or reiterated, refurbished. What's the word? Re-edited, all that stuff. And no one cares until it's a black IP that is stirring up this much noise. People would normally take, you're watching a show, a movie, reading a book, an article 2, 3+ times. You must be really into it. You're studying it. There's something that caught your attention. You're passionate about it. We've been seeing this. People have been talking about they've seen it 2, 3, 4 times. This is real cinema. This is what Martin Scorsese, when he kind of not talked down, but kind of gave his critique of the MCU and said, you know, they're good movies, but it's not cinema. This is cinema. This is what Martin Scorsese was talking about. Sinners is cinema. But now all of a sudden there's some weird discourse about it from a spiritual aspect and stuff like that. And I just find it so inconsistent to the point it's frustrating, as you can tell. It makes it hard to take it seriously. But I'm gonna go and leave it now because my camera's gonna die and I don't feel like putting another battery in to continue my rant. That's my rant on Sinners. Let me know what y'all guys thought in the movie. If you made it this far, appreciate you for sticking with me. Let me know if I should make longer movies about this, tech stuff, whatever. I'm still gonna talk about that. I'm not sure if I'm gonna pump out just a sheer number of videos like I've done before, but we'll see. But I'll go and leave it here, guys. Give me your feedback in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.